Hello, my name is Dr. Rita Redberg, and I'm the director of the Inquiry Curriculum. Today, I have the great honor of presenting the Short-Term Dean's Prizes and the Exceptional Mentorship Awards. The Inquiry Curriculum, which hosts these awards, is one way for the school to support students who have a deep interest in biomedical research and scholarship. Summer Explore is a unique program that works to cultivate learners longitudinally throughout their careers by providing mentorship and training. Our learners are comprised of the second-year class, who all work diligently over the summer to complete their research projects. Today, you'll hear from some of the very best of these learners, although all the projects were excellent, who have gone above and beyond academically during their time with the Summer Explore program. At the conclusion of these awards, we will have the opportunity to view a series of short presentations from all of our student award recipients. I'd now like to announce the recipients of the Short-Term Dean's Prize for Outstanding Medical Student Research and Scholarship. This award was created to honor some of the most innovative and talented student scholars in the School of Medicine. These awards recognize students who have the creativity and curiosity which we consider an essential characteristic of all great physicians and scientists. Our award winners are Gunvant Chaudhary, who, under the guidance of Dr. J. Ho San, Gunvant studied a clinical language search algorithm for the American College of Radiology appropriateness criteria.
Hi everyone, my name is Gunvant Chaudhary, and I wanted to present some findings from my Summer Explore research on developing an AI-fueled search engine for clinical text. We all know that reading clinical text is much different than reading a book or a news article. A single sentence in an EHR note can easily say 10 different things about a patient, all of which are important for different reasons. But if you've ever tried to directly lift a sentence from the EHR and Google it to find more information, perhaps a sentence like the patient one-liner, you might have found that Google will often not give you the search results you're looking for, because search engines like Google haven't been created to take in such long queries stuffed with clinical information. This becomes problematic when doctors are trying to find the best imaging option to diagnose their patients. Physicians and trainees spend all this time crafting clinical notes full of information, from chief complaints to history of present illnesses to one-liners, etc. And then they have to spend more time looking up what imaging study to order, maybe using UpToDate. But all the relevant symptoms and history are already in the EHR. And there are large openly available databases, such as the American College of Radiology's appropriateness criteria, that have evidence-based imaging recommendations for different patterns of patient symptoms and history. So why can't EHR text be automatically used to give the most appropriate imaging study? I'm sure no doctor out there will be against saving a bit of computer time. Well, as I alluded to, search engines of today are unfortunately not very good at processing long, clinically technical information. So my team and I at UCSF's Big Data and Radiology group wanted to see if we could solve this problem using AI. I trained an AI model on 223 million sentences from research abstracts and clinical notes, and the model learned to convert any block of text into a numerical vector. So we could then compare the vector of, say, a patient one-liner in the EHR with each vector of topics in the imaging recommendation database, and find the one topic vector that's most similar to the patient one-liner vector. So with this approach, 98% of short queries of patient symptoms had correct imaging topics in the top 3 search results, which was also the case for 86% of longer patient one-liners. We then pitted our AI-fueled search engine against a custom Google search that was restricted to searching only on the topics in the imaging recommendation database. Since Google was not created for clinical text, it only gave the correct search result in 5% of searches, while our AI search engine was correct in 90% of searches. Now, we still need more work before we can claim that our AI-fueled search is truly better than Google search or other search engines of today. But this is definitely a step in the right direction for all the doctors out there who are spending unnecessary time on their computers trying to find the best imaging options for their patients. Thank you.
Next is Priska Diala, who worked with Dr. Craig Cohen to complete her project entitled barriers and facilitators to integrating breast and cervical cancer screening programs in outpatient clinics in Western Kenya.
Every year, over 2 million new women around the world are diagnosed with breast cancer, and nearly 630,000 die from the disease. More than 70% of women who die yearly are from low and middle income countries. Lack of access to routine screening and early detection are some of the contributors to the breast cancer mortality rate disparity between high and low and middle income countries. In addition to other factors, the result is advanced stage of disease at diagnosis and an increased case mortality rate. In 2017, in an effort to address the high cancer mortality rate, the Kenyan government created a 5-year cancer control strategy focusing on prevention, early detection, and cancer screening. The primary focus for women were on breast and cervical cancer, the two leading causes of cancer incidence and mortality. While many health facilities in Kenya have begun offering cervical cancer screening, few are performing routine breast cancer screening. Our goal was to find a way to integrate these two services so that Kenyan women can routinely receive both. But to do so, we needed to first understand if this was feasible, and more importantly, what providers who were trained in these services felt regarding the integration. This gave birth to our study with our Kenyan collaborators. Among those trained to provide cervical cancer screening, we wanted to assess their understanding of breast cancer screening guidelines and their perceptions of the barriers and facilitators to integrating breast and cervical cancer screening. We learned that few providers were fully knowledgeable on the breast cancer screening guidelines. These providers unanimously urged for the integration of breast and cervical cancer screening services, noting that it was long overdue. One provider beautifully said, "We must empower women. If they cannot do for themselves the cervix, they can do for themselves the breast." For integration to be successful, the providers identified 3 prominent factors that must be addressed. First, they explained that the community needs to be educated and sensitized on the need and importance of cancer screening. Without this, they argued that integration would not be fruitful, as patients would not seek the care. Second, there's a need to address staff shortages. Most facilities had 1 or 2 nurses tasked with providing cancer screening, family planning services, and/or maternal and child health consultations. Lastly, the lack of consistency in the supply of equipment, mainly in the supply of cervical cancer screening equipment, often results in the inability to provide cancer screening services even when patients are present and seeking the care. When these barriers are addressed, providers unanimously agreed that they are willing and ready for integration.
Casey Hahn was mentored by Dr. Doris Wang and completed the project iMRI Guided DBS is superior to traditional awake DBS in targeting accuracy and clinical outcomes in patients with Parkinson's disease.
One of the brain's greatest enigmas is why deep brain stimulation works. For a patient with Parkinson's disease who cannot bring food to their mouth without tremoring uncontrollably or lift their feet off the ground, neurosurgeons can zap a part of their brain and the tremor virtually disappears. We don't know why it works, but it does. Patients with Parkinson's disease or even depression or pain can reclaim a higher quality of life with the help of a little electrode that applies continuous stimulation deep in their brain. Deep brain stimulation is a historically successful but poorly understood method for surgically treating Parkinson's disease. However, the surgery itself can be hard on patients. In the past, it involved waking up the patient during the surgery to make sure stimulation was applied to the correct part of the brain. Weaned off anesthesia and their Parkinson's medications, patients are awakened to complete various motor tasks, like touch my finger, or pretend to drink this. Some patients even play the violin or sing. The marvel of the human brain aside, you can also imagine how uncomfortable this must be for these patients. They're off their medications, head fixed, and in a completely foreign environment. The physical and psychological stress of being awake during surgery greatly limits who can tolerate DBS surgery. So, interventional MRI, abbreviated iMRI, was developed at UCSF and uses serial imaging to directly visualize the placement of electrodes during surgery, replacing the need for awake intraoperative testing and hopefully being more inclusive. So is it really better? We conducted a retrospective single-center study to compare traditional awake DBS with iMRI in almost 300 patients with Parkinson's disease. We looked at lead accuracy by comparing the coordinates of the intended target and the coordinates of the actual lead placement. Between the two, iMRI had a significantly smaller error, suggesting a greater targeting accuracy. Then we compared clinical outcomes, first with the Unified Parkinson's Disease Rating Scale Part 3, which refers to the motor exam and includes measures like speech, gait, finger tapping, etc. Then with levodopa equivalent daily dose, a way of standardizing medication levels across patients with Parkinson's disease. And finally with lead voltage. We found no significant difference between the two groups in all of these clinical outcome measures, suggesting that iMRI is just as effective as traditional awake DBS. All in all, iMRI-guided DBS is superior in targeting accuracy as well as equally effective in clinical outcomes. Because of this, iMRI-guided DBS expands the population of patients who may benefit from DBS. Removing the physical and psychological barriers, interventional MRI will allow so many more patients to experience the life-changing but highly curious effects of zapping the brain.
Next is Joy Jin, who under the guidance of Dr. Alexander Marsan conducted her project entitled Analyzing the Effects of Therapeutic Gene Knock-in Using CRISPR in Human T Cells for Cancer Treatment.
Hi, my name is Joy Jin, and my Summer Explore project focuses on understanding the effects of therapeutic gene edits made using CRISPR in human T cells for cancer treatment. So that was a mouthful. I'm going to start with a bit of background. I'm sure that some of you are familiar with the concept of using therapeutic T cells for cancer treatment. One of the most prominent examples is CAR T cells, which were recently FDA approved for leukemia and lymphoma treatment. The basic concept is that we can extract T cells from cancer patients, and we can insert therapeutic gene edits into the genome of these cells using CRISPR and Cas9 machinery, which recently won a Nobel Prize. These engineered T cells can then be inserted back into the body and produce the therapeutic proteins that allow them to fight tumor cells with greater efficiency. This technique is highly promising, but they still face many challenges in the treatment of solid tumors like lung, colon, and breast cancer. And these solid tumor cancers actually account for the most cancer-related deaths in the US today. So there's a large clinical unmet need. Many scientists are trying to figure out how to tackle these problems, primarily because tumor cells can actually co-opt immune signaling in the body, such as the use of cytokines, to make therapeutic T cells less effective. One remaining challenge in the field is that it's difficult to compare the effects of gene edit A versus B versus C and see what the downstream effects of these edits are in thousands of proteins involved in cancer and immunology signaling. So this is what my project actually focuses on. I worked with collaborators in the Marsan lab and the Yale labs to build upon existing methodologies that allow us to sequence cells at a single cell level to examine and study thousands of different proteins. And my research actually found that engineered T cells, which had TGF-beta R2 41BB edits into the genome, were actually able to turn an immunosuppressive signal, TGF-beta, into one that activated T cells further. And TGF-beta often results in the failure of many therapies in the clinic. So this research is highly promising, but there are still continued studies in mice and in other in vitro assays that we need to perform. So I'm excited to see where this takes us.
Next is Matthew Oranger, who worked with Dr. Nirav Panja to complete his project entitled Acutely Increased Workload is Highly Correlated with Significant Injuries Among National Basketball Association Players.
In 2019, the Toronto Raptors shocked the world, beating the Golden State Warriors and winning the NBA championship. The Raptors and star player Kawhi Leonard took an unconventional path to win the franchise's first title. Leonard only played in 60 of the team's 82 regular season games, despite being generally free of injury all year. This strategy is called load management, and it has ignited debate among basketball coaches, fans, and general managers alike. Load management is the practice of resting healthy players for games during the regular season, in the hope of preventing overuse injuries and keeping players fresh for the postseason playoffs. There are data that illustrate the association between cumulative workload and injury risk in soccer and volleyball players. However, despite load management gaining popularity, there has not yet been a study that examines the role of cumulative fatigue and injury risk in NBA players, until now. The goal of our study was to examine potential markers of cumulative body stress and risk factors for injury in NBA players to be able to recommend appropriate injury mitigation strategies for coaches and general managers. We hypothesized that increased cumulative workload, as measured by minutes per game and a number of in-game statistics over the 3, 5, and 10 games directly preceding injury, would be associated with increased injury risk. We directly compared full season statistical averages to the statistical averages from the 1, 3, 5, and 10 games directly preceding injuries for our cohort of 34 players. We included only players who suffered significant in-game musculoskeletal injuries causing them to miss at least 10 games. We found that increased minutes played per game in the 3, 5, and 10 games directly preceding injury were highly correlated with increased injury risk. Notably, there was not an increase in the minutes played per game in the 1 game preceding injury, suggesting a cumulative fatigue mechanism at play. This is the first study to examine the role that cumulative fatigue plays in predisposing NBA players to injury. We found that even a relatively small increase in minutes played per game, of around 5%, was strongly associated with increased injury risk. This has major implications for how coaches may safely optimize performance without risking injury. At a minimum, our results may inform playing time decisions by NBA coaches. While debate about load management will continue on in bars, on sports talk radio, and in the front offices of the multi-billion-dollar companies that are NBA franchises, our results may be able to shed some light on this controversial issue. It is clear that cumulative workload is in fact associated with increased injury risk in NBA players. Perhaps the most effective injury mitigation strategy will prove to be keeping a given player's minutes played per game constant over time. Or perhaps the Raptors' tactic of resting healthy players for games altogether will become the dominant method. In either case, this study provides evidence that limiting cumulative stress on players' bodies over time is crucially important, competitively and for player safety. Beyond the NBA, our results have potential implications for athletes in all sports across all levels of competition.
Hannah Sanz, mentored by Dr. Michael Wilson, completed the project Detection of TB Meningitis using multiplex PCR enrichment, followed by next-generation sequencing.
Microbes abound in the world around us. Many are good, some are bad, and some are worse depending on where they go and what they do in our bodies. Tuberculosis, or TB, is one of these bad bugs. When TB gets into the brain, it causes a severe infection that can be debilitating and even deadly. The thing is, there might be just a handful of TB bacteria in the brain during this infection. Detecting that tiny handful of bacteria in the brain is challenging. Our best technique in clinic misses TB up to 30% of the time because of this. We need to be better at finding TB so that we can treat people who have this infection as quickly as possible. So, what can we use to effectively find those little bacteria? The answer may be next-generation sequencing. Next-generation sequencing, or NGS, is a way to survey all of the DNA in a sample to detect the DNA of bugs that are causing disease, such as TB. This great technology has existed for a while, but it can be very expensive. The costs of NGS often make it inaccessible in areas of the world where TB infections are the most common. For my project, I explored a possible solution to this problem. I started with some brain fluid samples from people with TB infections and ran them through a new, lower-cost method of NGS that would be feasible to run in low-resource settings. The result? Our method of NGS found to be incredibly well, many times better than previous attempts with NGS to find TB in the same samples. We were even able to find TB in a sample that was missed by our best current diagnostic test. In addition, this method showed potential for not only finding TB, but also other bugs that can cause infections in the brain and can be mistaken for TB. Furthermore, this method may be able to provide information that clinicians can use to choose specific treatments for each individual patient. Because we can read large portions of the TB genome sequence through NGS, we can find mutations for drug resistance that are present in a given case of infection. This would be valuable information since TB is known to be resistant against many of our first-line treatment options. Pinpointing those mutations would thereby enable clinicians to start patients on the best, most effective treatment for their particular infection. Altogether, these advances would aid clinicians in swiftly detecting and treating people with TB and other infections of the brain. Using NGS could thus greatly improve and save patients' lives. Remember, we already have powerful techniques to find bugs in the brain. Now it is a matter of making these tools accessible in the places where they are needed the most.
And Hope Schwartz, under the guidance of Dr. Taske Bongiovanni, conducted her project entitled Disparities in Trauma Pain Assessment. Are we under-assessing patients with limited English proficiency?
Hello, my name is Hope Schwartz, and today I'll be presenting my research on pain assessment in trauma patients with limited English proficiency. This project was mentored by Dr. Taske Bongiovanni in the Department of Surgery. Pain assessment is critical in trauma. Not only are these injuries acutely painful, but trauma patients are also at risk of persistent chronic pain, PTSD, and functional impairment, all of which increase the risk of re-injury. From the moment of admission until discharge, inpatient pain assessment forms the foundation of pain management. In the hospital, pain is assessed using the patient-reported 0 to 10 numeric rating scale, which relies on patient-provider communication and might be less effective or underutilized in patients with communication barriers. And this is particularly important for our diverse patient population. About 20% of ZSFG trauma patients have limited English proficiency, or LEP. We already know that LEP patients experience suboptimal communication in acute care. This leads to increased testing, ventilator days, and restraint use. So we wanted to know, how does pain assessment differ for LEP patients hospitalized after trauma? We hypothesized that LEP patients would have less frequent pain assessment, as well as potentially lower pain scores. We turned to the ZSFG Trauma Registry to answer this question, including in our study about 12,000 adults who were hospitalized between 2012 and 2018. And so what did we find? Well, English proficient patients had about 12 pain assessments per day, compared to 10 for LEP patients. And even in multivariable models controlling for demographic and injury characteristics, LEP patients still had fewer assessments, by about 1 assessment per day. LEP patients also had lower pain scores, by about 0.5 point in multivariable models. Differences in frequency of pain assessment have super important implications for patient outcomes. Increased use of NRS pain scores leads to faster pain medication delivery and better pain control overall, which can have downstream effects on long-term recovery. Also, many medications for breakthrough pain can only be used when patients reach certain pain score thresholds. And so if LEP patients are assessed less often or have systematically lower pain scores, then this might lead to suboptimal pain management as well. The role of patient language and language barriers in trauma and acute care is an important but poorly studied area of health inequity. Our research highlights the need for increased use of interpreter services and the development of cross-culturally validated pain assessment tools. Thank you to everyone who supported this project, especially to my mentor, Dr. Bongiovanni, and thank you for listening.
And our final recipient is Mark Taylor. Mentored by Dr. Alan Balmain, Mark completed his research entitled Network-Level Gene Expression Reveals Cryptic Oncogenic Paths Through Single-Cell Developmental Landscapes.
Today I'd like to talk about cancer. We often think of cancer as the result of mutations that accrue over time, and this is certainly true. However, the load of mutations carried by many tumors is diminishingly small relative to changes in the entire transcriptome, which becomes massively dysregulated during oncogenesis, being re-networked in complicated and nuanced ways. To measure this dysregulated transcriptome in cancer, which represents all of the genes being expressed in a cancer cell, there have been two main methods. The first is bulk tissue microarray or RNA sequencing assays. It's called bulk tissue because it literally takes a bulk sample of tissue and grinds it up and measures gene expression. This is great because you can measure lots of samples, lots of tumors, and you can generate gene networks from these data. But because we grind up tissue, we lose any individual cell characteristics. The second and more recent approach is through single-cell RNA sequencing, which does exactly what it sounds like. It measures gene expression in single cells. This is great because we know when we take a tumor sample, it contains lots of different kinds of cells. There are immune cells, blood cells, vascular endothelium, connective stromal cells, the list goes on. But only some of those cells are real cancer cells, doing the actual work of the tumors, which are called the tumor parenchyma. However, only a few samples can be processed in this way. So clearly these bulk and single-cell methods have complementary pros and cons, but combining them has proven to be a challenge. So what I did this summer was to come up with a novel method that integrates bulk expression data with single-cell expression data. When I entered the lab, it had just gotten back a really unique data set, which was a complete squamous cell carcinoma series in mice. Squamous cell carcinomas are a fantastic model to work with because they occur in the flattened epithelial cells, or squames, of the outer skin, which is very easy to access and manipulate. More importantly, this series encompassed the entire oncogenic march, from normal skin to metastatic cancer. It consisted of nearly 58,000 cells, each with gene expression measurements for almost 20,000 genes. What I did then was to array these cells into an abstract mathematical space called a gene expression manifold. This space is what is shown behind me. Each dot represents a cell, positioned according to its transcriptome-wide expression profile. So what this manifold does is it imagines that each gene is a dimension, and then reduces these dimensions so we can understand them. We humans experience the world in 3 dimensions, or 4 if we register time, but cancers experience it in 20,000 dimensions, or genes. In order for we humans, trapped in our 3D world, to understand this experience of cancer, we have to rebuild its world in 2 or 3 dimensions, and that's what this manifold has done. I then used previously gathered bulk expression data to generate networks of genes based on important seed genes. For example, behind me, the cancer stem cell gene LGR6 is the seed gene. I then created a network-level gene expression value that integrates over all the genes in this network. This paints a radically clearer picture of the genetic changes underlying oncogenesis in these data than previous single-gene approaches. This is because genes occur in networks, and oncogenesis in the system is occurring as network-level dysregulation. So, by considering changes in multiple genes simultaneously, shifting the paradigm from single genes to networks of genes, and by leveraging all of our historical bulk data with newer single-cell data, we are beginning to understand what is really going on in a cell's genes to cause cancer. Thank you.
Congratulations to all of our short-term Dean's Prize recipients. We are so proud of you, and I think you have a flavor of the depth and breadth of the incredible projects these students have done. At this time, I'd like to thank all of the wonderful mentors who, without their support, these awards would not be possible. Great mentorship is not just a commitment of time and resources, but also requires a special dedication to nurture our student scholars' development as physician scientists. I'd now like to present the Exceptional Mentorship Award winners. Our first recipient is Dr. Jennifer Kokohoba, PharmD and Professor of Clinical Pharmacy and Vice Chair for Faculty Development. Dr. Kokohoba was nominated by her mentee, Mary Khan Giraud. Next is Dr. Nisha Acharya, MD, Director of the Uveitis and Ocular Inflammatory Disease Service and the Uveitis Fellowship at the F.I. Proctor Foundation. Dr. Acharya was nominated by her mentees, Ahili Chattopadhyay and Angela Liu. Dr. Michael Duke, PhD, is the project director of the Benioff Homelessness and Housing Initiative. Dr. Duke was nominated by his mentees, Deborah Yip and Ali Zahir. Dr. Jason Nagata, MD, is an assistant professor of pediatrics in the Division of Adolescent and Young Adult Medicine. Dr. Nagata was nominated by his mentee, Jonathan Chu. Finally, Dr. Rehim Alwan, MD, MPH, assistant professor of emergency medicine. Dr. Alwan was nominated by his mentee, Dalia Kaki. Congratulations again to all of our exceptional mentorship award winners. Now we will hear a few words from the student mentees on their mentorship experience.
My name is Mary Conjuro. I am a second-year medical student at the UC Berkeley UCSF Joint Medical Program. I'm also a part of UCSF's Prime program. I met Jennifer when I went to UCSF on October 2019 at an info session for Mabuhay Health Center, and her presentation on Filipino health disparities just made me very interested to work with her. And so after the meeting, I spoke with her, and immediately she set up a time to meet with me. I nominated Jennifer because she made sure that I was on track for my master's thesis project. When I was in my first year, I just didn't know what I wanted to do, and I had so many ideas, but she really took the time in my mentorship journey with her to just listen to me and make sure that I do something that I'm passionate about, not just something to do, but something that I actually will enjoy and will help me in my professional career and help serve the community I wanted to serve. And for that, for her not telling me what to do and just really guiding me through that process is the reason why I nominated her for this award, and also for the fact that she met with me every week and was very responsive to everything, to all my emails. So she's the best mentor that I could have asked for and have ever had in my journey so far. I just want to thank Jennifer for believing in me and for being in my corner and for helping this first generation Filipina immigrant do something for her community and believe in herself as a researcher and as a medical student. And so thank you, Jennifer, for everything.
My name is Ahili Chattopadhyay, and I'm a second-year medical student at UCSF. I met Dr. Acharya back in 2018 when I had recently found out that I had gotten into UCSF, and I reached out to her to shadow her, and she was immediately very excited to have me, and when I met her, she was very excited to teach. So I knew I wanted to work with her again in the future, and I reached out to her during Summer Explore planning, and she was, again, very welcoming and happy to work together. I had a wonderful experience working with Dr. Acharya this summer. Obviously, the summer was not what anyone had anticipated with the COVID-19 pandemic, but from the outset, she wanted to talk about how to make the summer still as productive and enjoyable as possible. And outside of the projects I worked on with her, I got to be a part of lunchtime didactics and patient discussions and presentations. She involved me in a lot of different aspects of patient care as well, so that was awesome. I think that Dr. Acharya is a combination of compassionate and humble and hardworking and resilient, and is an amazing role model that I look up to a lot. And I'm glad for the opportunity to have been able to work with her, and mostly just to have her as a part of my life as a mentor moving forward.
I'm Angela Liu, and I'm a second-year medical student at UCSF. I found my mentor when I was searching for projects that I have an interest in, and my mentor personally has an interest in herpes zoster ophthalmologus and works with big data, and I was interested in learning more about both. I nominated my mentor because she is a fantastic mentor to me. She really cares about my personal growth and my professional growth. She has always cheered me on when I learn new skills, and she is very patient when it comes to teaching. And this was the first time I led a research project, and she has always been there from the get-go, and it has been really comforting. She also created a lot of experiences for me to explore ophthalmology, and during times like COVID, that wasn't something that I was expecting. So for Dr. Acharya, I would like to thank her so much for making me a better researcher, a better writer, a better presenter, and help me learn how to balance my life during medical school and all the other activities that I would love to do on a daily basis. And she's honestly one of the best supporters for me, and I would like to end with that.
My name is Jonathan Chu, and I'm a second-year medical student here at UCSF. So my mentor is Dr. Jason Nagata, and I met him just kind of cold emailing. I emailed a bunch of pediatricians and saw that he was working on something really interesting, which was male eating disorders, and that was something that I found really fascinating and really related to, and just it worked out that way. I nominated Dr. Nagata because he's just been an outstanding mentor. He's so patient whenever I asked him questions. A lot of things I didn't understand about epidemiology, biostatistics, manuscript writing, research in general, all these things. He really took the time to explain things for me, direct me to resources, help me with writing, give me feedback. Really just an all-around great mentor and great person to work with. So I just want to say to Jason, thank you so much for helping me with my research project, for letting me shadow you on the inpatient wards to kind of see how our research relates to actual patient care, really emphasizing what it means to ask a good question and think of a good research plan and think outside the box of, if I were an objective reader for this work, like what would I be thinking? Just teaching me so much about what it means to be a good doctor and a good researcher.
My name is Dahlia Kaki, and I'm an MS2 at UCSF. I met Dr. Alwan through a happenstance connection. I was looking for a bunch of different research opportunities and met with a couple of attendings, and one of whom thought that Dr. Alwan and I would be a really good fit for one another. I nominated Dr. Alwan because from our very first meeting, she really went above and beyond to get to know me and to really provide me with support and resources. And since that first meeting, she's really only gone above and beyond in terms of what quality mentorship looks like. I think working with her, I felt like an equal and a partner in the research, which is something that can be really difficult to come by, at least in my experience in academics. She has expert status and she is the attending, but she always welcomed my ideas and my reflections and my interjections. And rather than just have me shadow the process, I think I was really given the space to grow and was given the floor to really develop my qualitative research skills and my inquiry abilities. But that being said, I think our mentorship relationship didn't really focus on the project itself or just the project alone. Dr. Alwan really always took the time to ensure that I was doing well. She always checked in, especially with the early COVID pandemic. She really made it clear that school was like my number one priority, as well as my health and my family. So I felt like I was really held to high standards, but there was a lot of room for vulnerability and for making mistakes and for really cultivating healthy boundaries. The most important lesson I think I learned from working with Dr. Alwan was the value of constant self-reflection, both about our position within the research process and also about our research findings' impact on society. The nature of our work really centered around amplifying the voices and experiences of vulnerable populations. And over the year that we worked together, Dr. Alwan really modeled what ethical, responsible, justice-driven research looks like. And it was an absolute honor and privilege to be able to participate in that experience alongside her. So I'm very much excited to continue working with Dr. Alwan.
On behalf of the Inquiry Curriculum and all of the Inquiry staff, faculty, and advisors, I thank you all. I am so impressed by the quality of the work presented here today and encourage all of our student researchers to continue your scholarship in your area of interest. I look forward to seeing you all virtually at the Explore Symposium poster sessions on November 30th. Thank you so much.